Okay, Tuesday, November 23rd. We are front office flow, Thomas Dimitroff and Scott Goldman, Dr. Scott Goldman, one of the most well renowned sports psychologists in the country and very well regarded in the world. Scott, glad you're on again with us here. I'm out here in Colorado right now. Just spent 3 days in Vail, trying to snowboard as much as I can with very limited runs open. Just got back to Boulder to my home here with my son Mason, and we're just hanging out for another day. Where have you been?
It's not where I've been, it's where I'm going. I'll be there in about 2 days. So, put another log on the fire for me. This sounds like a dream scenario. Let's go.
Well, one day we're gonna do this together. Maybe out of this house here in Colorado, we'll go somewhere and we'll make shift like we are getting together, having this really deep, thoughtful conversation, this round table, and we'll do it somewhere here in Colorado. Maybe that'll be a good way to do it.
Sounds perfect. I just learned something today. You
You're
just got to invite yourself enough times and eventually you'll get yourself to Vail. Perfect.
excellent. Hey, I was sitting here thinking over the last few days. I was trying to get my head around where my head has been over the last few weeks and watching what was going on in this league. We talked a little bit about how the league is up and down. Some teams are winning, some are losing, some people are losing jobs, some are sort of on the way to potentially losing their jobs. Basically, talking about the inconsistency, the turmoil that goes along with running a football team as a general manager. And I really started thinking how complicated it is, Scott, to be running a football team as a co-team builder, a GM, along with the head coach, and how you can continue to focus on team building amid the sort of up and down inconsistency of a team, of a season, of a team's season. And I started thinking it was really complicated, Scott, trying to think about scouting, trying to go out on the road and scout as a general manager when shit's hitting the fan. You're not sure whether you're going to make the playoffs, whether you're going to lose out down the stretch, whether you're going to have a job, back to the hot seat stuff. You and I have talked about this before. That's not easy during this time. I don't. What is your thought, from a psychological standpoint, about how you would say to me, Thomas, calm the f down. Let's get this figured out here.
Well, I mean, it's funny, right? Because the cliche in psychology is always like, be where your feet are, kind of thing, right? But I always find that kind of expression is so much easier said than done. And just to kind of put a concrete example of that, you and other GMs that I've worked with, you'll go to say like a Thursday night or a Friday night football game, and I know because they've shared with me in the back of their head, they're at the game scouting a particular talent, but in the back of their head, they're just thinking about what's going on in the building, the drama, the fire, the tension, who's saying what. Sometimes it's amazing in the facility. You can walk down the hallway and get pulled into one of the most important conversations. I know I've had a couple of what I call unincidental power meetings where all of a sudden it's the owner, the head coach, and the GM get into a lively debate about, are we going to sign an extension on the quarterback? And it's like, really, we're talking about this in the most random way. There's no PowerPoint or anything. So I'll start with the question. First, is that not truth? And second, how do you keep where your feet are at?
So it is so the truth. And I was thinking about that very thing. I had two head coaches that I worked with, again, one being Mike Smith and one being Dan Quinn. Both really, really focused on a week, right? Both had really, really specific plans through a week and were very, very focused on where they were. Really, both of them, interestingly enough, though they knew that I had a job to go out, Scott, and scout here and there during a season, they both would have preferred me to be in the building with them during the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays of the week. That becomes a little, again, it becomes a little bit complicated for me as a team builder when we know we may not make the playoffs and we need to really focus on position A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z. I need to get my ass out on the road. I need to visit these teams. I need to watch these players live. And yet, I also need to be side by side with my partner in all of this, being the head coach. And so we would have these conversations quite often, and we would determine from week to week, hey, are you good head coach, are you good with me taking off for 1, 2, or 3 days? Or would you rather it be one day? Well, this week, maybe it's best if if it's only one day. They didn't in any way, Scott, control my world that way. But as far as what they were looking for and what they thought was going to be best for the organization and how things were operating during that week, we would decide how much I'd be on the road. And believe me, my EA at that time, Laura Moore, and my other EAs, they would be pulling their hair out because they would have all of these flights booked and all of these reservations at hotels booked, potential other restaurants booked, and out of the blue, I would say, I'm out. I'm not going out this week. So keeping your feet on the ground is interesting as well. And I can lead into that. I want to go back to your question. When you ask me that, are you referring to big picture keeping my feet on the ground with the head coach, where we're going with our season, or much bigger picture about being a general manager in this league and being able to function during this
Yeah,
time?
well, first of all, one thought that comes to my head, there's this great Yiddish proverb, man plans, God laughs, right? So you're talking about all these different plans and travel arrangements, and yet, all of a sudden you got a wide receiver who tweaks a hammy and everything else goes out the window. But I think the question I was really asking is, so just I'll create a hypothetical for you. Let's say there's a quarterback in Oregon and you're really curious about what he's like live. For you, from going from Atlanta to Oregon's a long trip. So you get there, you're at the game, and your phone starts blowing up because something's happening back in Atlanta, and it becomes now a really tough decision for you, right? Because you flew out to Oregon not to be on the phone, but meanwhile, you've got staff issues, player personnel issues, all kinds of things that you're managing. So, how do you, I guess the question is, do you disregard the phone or do you take the phone call? That's the first question.
Well, I would say as a scout, when I used to go out to visit these schools, Scott, I had my day set up. I'd be watching video all day with the other scouts and the other personnel men. I really set out when I would go out and visit schools as a general manager. I wasn't planning on doing that work. I had already watched as much video as I could, and then I'd watch it when I got back. I was trying to function during the day on the phone, managing the building back from maybe Oregon or Boulder, Colorado. But I literally was open to always being available so that I could, again, be able to watch the players that I was scouting, but also being able to manage and keep the building together as much as possible. Keeping your feet on the ground to that point, it was not easy. And there were certain weeks it was really easy. Other weeks it was really, really hard. So the midline of it all, it just depended on how the season was going and how the weeks were going. This comes back to my initial comment. When you are thinking you have an opportunity to be in the playoffs, but one game takes you one direction, one game takes you another direction, then your head starts swirling all around. As much as you think you are a solid and sound executive, there is so much uncertainty going into each week, which we will get to in many, many podcasts to come, that it really just depended on where you are during that time, during that place, within a week or within a
So I
season.
was working with a team, and they were one game away from the playoff line, right? With 3, 4 games left to go. And one of the executives, who was out of the building but had the ear of the owner, suggested that we trade the star defensive lineman because we could get some trade value for it. So it was right before the trade deadline, give you kind of that concept. And I remember the head coach kind of getting wind of this and was just pissed. Calls me in and goes, Scott, like, what the fuck? We're trying to make it to the playoffs. We're sprinting to the playoffs, and I'm hearing that they want to trade our star defensive tackle because they think they could get the most value out of him. He was a coming up free agent. So I'm curious, it wasn't the GM person who was making these moves, but actually an executive outside the building. He was over at the stadium. It was an executive outside the building who was chirping in the owner's ear that created a whole bunch of distraction for that week and subsequent weeks. How do you manage that?
Well, you head that off at the pass. And in our situation at Atlanta, it was myself and Dan Quinn and or Mike Smith in those early years who were responsible for any football operation. when you have an executive outside of the building, so to speak, or who is from the business operations side of it, and it could be a president you're referring to, I think that is a recipe for disaster if it's not understood that the football people take care of the football decisions. And believe me, I would have jumped right into that, and I would have been on the phone talking to Arthur Blank if we ever had issues like that, because again, it was deleterious to the success and the operation, smooth operation of our organization. If anyone else was out there talking about what we should be doing or not doing, of course it happened, but when we knew in the very end the decisions that were coming down to trades were between myself and the head coach and the owner, it allowed us to operate fairly smoothly. If we ever got wind that someone was suggesting it from somewhere else in the building, believe me, I would be right at the doorstep addressing the issue. I'm a big believer in that. Not losing my mind, yelling and going off the handle, but more saying, "Hey, wait the fuck a minute. We need to make sure that we are addressing this and we're not going awry here by having other people directing how we're going to put this organization together." That's what I was also going to say too, very quickly. So you have all these things going on. You have an owner who's really key on, of course, making the playoffs. You have a head coach who is working like crazy to try to get to the playoffs. You have a general manager who is also thinking about a year from now or draft picks for now. From now, there's a lot going on with a lot of different areas. And again, I can't begin to suggest how that can get a little bit nerve wracking and unnerving, excuse me, can get nerve wracking and unnerving when things aren't operating smoothly and we have people moving in different directions. So it comes back to the importance of having that partnership between the head coach and the GM very strongly in line, though you may disagree at times, but in the end, it's you operating together as the couple in it all and not other people within the building. So, Scott, one of the examples I was going to use is in today's world, right now, the New York Giants fire Jason Garrett as their offensive coordinator. There's Coach Judge. Things are spinning around within that organization. There's Dave Gettleman, good buddy of mine, who's in the middle of all of this. He doesn't, I'm sure, know what's going on, whether he knows what's going on, don't get me wrong, but he's got his mind in one part of the building, his mind in another part of the building. He's also thinking, man, I need to get out and scout individuals to make this football team better. And there are ups and downs, backs and forths here. Like that is, again, really unnerving. And how do you approach that and still keep the morale up within a building at 3-7, which is not easy to do?
Yeah, and look, just on a slight tangent, but not to get lost in the weeds. Imagine the cruelty of being fired days before Thanksgiving. All of a sudden, you're already thinking about like the holiday season, everything else, and this is the subject matter that you're going to be dealing with all of your friends and family. Painful, painful moment. But the question that I really have for you is like, have you ever had a time where you were in the facility in the building and felt like you needed to be out on the road scouting, or out on the road scouting and in the back of your head going, God, I really should be back at the building?
This is why you're a world renowned psychologist. Hell yes. It's unbelievable. There were times when you're sitting there. I remember times, especially 19, that final stretch when I was in Atlanta, things were going awry. And all I thought was, I need to have my ass out on the road, putting my eye on these players. What I used to say, sniffing their pits. There's nothing like that. Yeah, you can watch video, but you have to be out looking at these players. And then, oh, by the way, when I was out watching the players, and I knew something was going up, on back at the office, the yearning to be back there. This comes back to your comments about, keeping your feet on the ground. It is a really tough thing to keep your feet on the ground as a general manager amid an uncertain year. All right, so we're back for our second session here, and that second session is on the chair with Scott Goldman. Come on, man, bring it on. I'm at your beck and call.
So, I try to be well informed. I'm a constant learner and reader, and something that you see a lot in the literature right now is the lessons of how to be a leader, and it always includes certain sort of tried and true mechanisms like humility or being a service leader. And so I just kind of wanted to explore with you a little bit, how do you perceive the philosophy of service leadership? Let's start there.
Well, look, I love the idea. There are many ideas that sound good. It's not always easy to be as a service leader or a servant leader. I believe there are elements of my leadership style that I believe are all about authenticity, all about being direct, all about being empathic and of course feeling and looking someone in the eye and sharing with them and understanding and being able to be as honest as possible, as a leader. That said, it is not easy for me all the time as a leader in today's world to say I need to do everything sort of at the whim or everything for all the other employees within the building, like it's all about them. Sometimes when you start spending too much time trying to make the most and provide for everyone else within the building as a leader, it takes away from your true leadership ability, as in leading the organization. So I don't want to lose fact or track, excuse me, and I don't want to put the fact aside that service leadership is the right thing. There are elements that are right, but I don't want to lose who I am, Scott. My approach is to be real and direct, and I don't want to lose it by softening too
Yeah,
much.
sometimes I like to point out to both people outside of the league and inside of the league the quote unquote universal truths versus the things that are different. So some things are the same. Like, if I skin my knee, I'm going to skin my knee. It doesn't matter the location. And other things are a little bit more specific to the context of the environment. So I was curious. I know one common mechanism in leadership is to be very deferential, especially when it's a successful moment. So it's like, hey, we're going to spread the wealth of the success. Hey, you contributed, you contributed, you contributed. But in the NFL, is there a risk to spreading out that success?
I've thought about this a lot as well. I do believe in spreading the wealth. I believe in lauding people within the organization who have done a truly good job, not just for the sake of doing it to stroke people, but when it is real, so that people know that they are being lauded for again their real successes. I think that is a wonderful part of leadership. I back to authenticity. I don't want to do it just to make someone feel good. I think there is a way to do it where people know that when they are lauded truly for doing the right thing, and everyone else within the building feels that way. That is easy, Scott, when things are going well for your organization. It is much more difficult to do when things are, as we were talking about earlier, when things are up and down and there are inconsistencies. You're not sure whether you're coming or going as an organization. People are getting injured. You're not sure about your playoff hopes. You're not sure about your relationship with your ownership group or your management. It's a lot more complicated to start lauding other people during those times when you probably need more as a general manager to be lauded, but things are being heaped on other people potentially. That is where it's more, that's where you combine that with people who may have some insecurities about their jobs, and then it's kind of a little bit of a snowball effect. All of a sudden, you're not doling out the lauding that you used to. You're feeling a little more insecure as a manager and as a leader, and then you're still trying to work your other relationships as well, and you're hoping to get some positive lauding yourself during a really uncertain time. That's not easy
Yeah,
again.
so, and I think this will be my last question. When managing the relationships, and you kind of hit on this a little bit, it's a 360-degree management. It's the people who you report to, it's the people that you are alongside of, and the people who report to you. When, you know, it's the heat of the season, the stress of the season. Like November is a hard time because, you know, you used to start to hear this in certain buildings where even some of the players would say something like, "Hey, if we tank this, we could all be home by January. Like we could all go to the warm weather states in January. And meanwhile, you got the upstairs coaches going like, man, if we can just kind of go on a run here, we can still be playing in January. So knowing where people's mindsets are, where it's like, are they all in? Are they all out? And you've got this 360-degree balance. I guess my question to you is, how do you keep your calm? Like, how do you stay in the eye of that storm? What are some of the things that you did to help keep yourself sane?
I think it was regular communication with the head coach for sure. And I was a big believer, as you well know, I would meet with Dan potentially 10 times a day. We would be talking about a lot of different things and making sure that there wasn't sort of the wondering what was going on, that we were talking about any issue that came up, whether it was football related, scheme related, player related, injury related, or down the hallway in the sports, athletic performance side of our building. We were always communicating regularly. And I think that made things a lot more or a lot calmer for both of us, knowing that there wasn't the what's around the corner, what are people talking about. This is a big discussion again. That element of what too many people in our league get to when things are uncertain, it's usually combined with paranoia. And the paranoia thing, as you know, in any business, not just sport or football, in any business, is a recipe for disaster. And it's, you're basically on your way to failure in
All
my
right,
mind.
wait.
You have to
I
feel,
got a bonus
yeah,
question. I
that's a
got a
part.
bonus question. I can't walk away
Yes.
from. But this will be the last one for this segment. Promise. Is there a comment that you knew you should have delivered, but for whatever reason you didn't? A compliment, not just a comment, but a compliment that you knew you should have delivered. Looking back on it, you're like, man, if I had just kind of given this one compliment, but you didn't. Did you ever have one of those?
And are you talking about to a person or to a head coach
It
in
could have
general?
been to
Which
anyone in
way?
the building where you're going, man, I should have given this one, I should have given this employee, this person a compliment. I think it would have helped the organization. It would have helped me, but you didn't pull that.
I think in general, those compliments or comments that I should have made had much more to do with I did not want to laud them too much because I feared that it may, again, it's my own issue, it would have softened them. The last thing I want them to think that I think that everything they are doing is exactly the way they need to be done. Like I wanted to keep things a little bit uncertain. And that sounds like it's game playing. It wasn't meant to be game playing. It was more, I want to pick and choose when I deliver my comments and my compliments. And at times I think I might have overthought that at times and I didn't follow through. And then that mode and that feeling, it basically dissipated and I didn't have that feeling and it didn't feel real to deliver it 2 or 3 days down the road. And then I just avoided it or I just moved on from it. So that is a very good point. Operating in the here and now as a general manager and making sure that you capitalize on the moments, to me, is a learned lesson for me moving into a next
And if it
opportunity.
makes you feel any better, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people in leadership positions that go, I just don't know if I'm supposed to hug them or hit them, and it's hard. That's why human behavior is so complicated, and human interaction is a multiplier of that. I appreciate the time and the
Well,
questions. Thanks.
that's a hugging and hitting. I want to remember that, just like opening up the rib cage. Okay, Scott, here we are, final session. Quick hitters. I'm throwing it over
All
to
right.
you. Toss them out
Well,
at
you
me.
started off earlier in the conversation talking about the New York Giants. I just wanted to hear, what are your thoughts about the Jason Garrett firing, especially at this phase of the season?
I was having a very close conversation with a very close friend recently. He said it always seems like anytime Jason Garrett gets fired, there's something personal about it. I love Jason. I think he's a fine football man. This is a really tough situation for an organization that has had its ups and downs this year, mainly downs, unfortunately. It's tough for Joe Judge as a head coach to make this decision, but I have heard through all the vines that, you know, when things were put together there with this organization and, John Mara had a really, fond relationship with Jason Garrett, that this becomes head coach and owner discussing about how they're going to do this, and they decide to do it. It's got to be really tough within that organization today after having made a move like that before the end of a season and before a potential termination in that situation. So
All
we'll
right,
see.
beautiful. The Seahawks have been one of the more successful teams over the last decade, and now all of a sudden they seem to be struggling more than ever before. What are some of your thoughts about what's contributing to this season's decline?
So the Seahawks, we all know. I mean, John Snyder and Pete Carroll work together very, very well as head coach and general manager. They are the epitome of positivity. The way that organization is run, the way that Pete Carroll approaches it, to see something like this, where you know, really to watch Pete Carroll walk off a press conference and come back a half an hour ago seems really out of character. Again, not throwing darts on this, but saying, putting myself in as a management person, saying, wow, how would I deal with that as a general manager in this? How would I get the message out to everyone that we're not just falling down the rails here, that this is something that is complicated and emotionally driven. And I'm sure they'll pull themselves out of all of this, but this is unlike the Seattle Seahawks, and I'll be interested to see how it plays out for the rest of the season.
Speaking of emotionally driven, seems like there's a lot of stuff going on in Cleveland right now. You got the fans booing the quarterback, and this was a team that started out hot, and everybody kind of picked them to be the darling of the league, especially after they had that playoff win last year. What are your thoughts about what's happening in Cleveland right now?
Well, look, what they're doing there, Andrew Barry, that organization, they were on the upswing again, as you know, and everyone was very positive about them coming into this season. To see that they have a 39% chance to make the playoffs, in a situation with Baker Mayfield, the quarterback, and the fan base, with more and more turmoil in a city, in a fan base that I have a lot of respect for and liking for, because that's my background, that's where I'm from. I will be very interested to see how this plays out within the next few weeks. To have a quarterback lash out at the Cleveland Browns fan base takes a lot of cojones, to be honest with you.
I'll just add and kind of summarize my thoughts here real quick on all three of these subject matters. One, I'll start with: no one's the villain of their own story. No one's trying to lose games or anything like that. And as the psychologist, I always just encourage people to remember and respect the humanity of all of these individuals, whether it's Jason Garrett and his family right now trying to process what happened, or just the rest of the New York Giants staff trying to recalibrate to having one less person in the building, meaning there's one more tick, more work, one more hour in the building, one less hour of sleep, etc. I think the Seahawks, like you said, I think they were setting the tone regarding a lot of positivity, and I believe that fire still exists there. And you know, I know I'll be cheering for them to find their wellness. And then with Baker, I just go back to that notion of like, and the whole Cleveland Brown staff. I think that's a really good group of solid individuals, and I know that they're doing the best that they can. And it's been a complicated year.
Well, the AFC in general has been complicated. I'm sorry. Got it. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening. I agree with you. The AFC has been complicated. I mean, any given Sunday, the NFL must be loving all these upsets.